Good afternoon. So today I come originally from Microsoft, so there's a certain style we have in presentation, and it's real hard for me to break. So today I'm going to talk to you about Yuanfen, and first of all I'm going to define that for you, and then I'm going to give you a theory about how I think Yuanfen works in your classroom. And to prove that theory, I'm going to look at my life and my classroom experience. And then I'll really dig in, if you will, to what great teachers really teach in their classrooms and ultimately what I really learned. And then I'll wrap up with giving you some pointers that I think will help you make your classrooms into incubators for creativity. So Yuanfen is a Chinese word that we often translate into English as fate or destiny. And Yuanfen comes from an ancient Taoist concept that views the cosmos like a piece of fabric. And along the threads of the fabric run people and time and places and events. And along those threads we call the warp and the woof, or the warp and the waft. When those threads meet and cross one another, that's where Yuanfen happens. And so the best English explanation of Yuanfen I've ever seen comes in a Miramax movie from 2001 called Serendipity. And in that movie, Jonathan Traeger, who's played by John Cusack, says to Sarah Thomas, who's played by Kate Beckinsale, life is not merely a series of meaningless accidents or coincidences, but rather it is a tapestry of events that culminate in an exquisite, sublime plan. And so that, I think, is really a great way of viewing what Yuanfen is. So my theory is that it's not random who appears in your classroom. In fact, it's Yuanfen. It's a life-changing opportunity for both teachers and students to add to the texture of someone's life and to be a significant part in one another's life tapestry. So how can I prove that theory? Well, if nothing else, I am your consummate student. I have been in classrooms for almost half my life, 26 years. It was a really wonderful exercise for me to list out all of my teachers, from kindergarten at Carson Elementary School in Denver, Colorado, through the years in Denver, all the way to when I was at Brown University, and then at Berkeley, and then at the IUP Center in Taiwan, and then at Thunderbird getting an MBA, and then finally at UCLA getting a law degree. And as I examined all of those teachers, I realized that there was something very important in that I spent half my life in their classrooms, and then I spent the other half of my life weaving my life's tapestry made up of these threads of very meaningful Yuanfen encounters with some very exceptional teachers. And though these teachers varied in the subjects that they taught, in their ethnicity, and where they were geographically, in all sorts of things, there were certain common threads, if you will, common things that they all shared. And that was they had a passion for what they taught. They had a passion for teaching. And they treated the classroom as an incubator for creativity. So I looked at these, important mentors in my life and what they taught as a subject matter and then what they taught as a life experience. And so I went back to my 6th grade class, Mrs. Bloom, Jean Bloom. Jean Bloom was a Julie Andrews lookalike. So it was like being taught by Mary Poppins. I always expected, songs to break out. And Mrs. Bloom taught art. Well, unfortunately, then as now, I can't draw or paint for the life of me. But Jean Bloom said to me, David, sit down and frame whatever you do as art, and let your imagination and inspiration guide you. And so I went home, and I was doing the dishes. This was before dishwashers. I was doing the dishes, and I was putting out the dishes. But I realized, as I was drying them, I could put a little aesthetic into the ordering of them. I, re-examined my room. I, started looking at how everything we do can become art. Finally, for my art project, I did find a medium I could work with, which was cut glass, and I made a stained glass window that didn't require drawing or painting, but it was a real challenge to learn how to cut glass. And then in my 12th grade class, I had a ceramics class. Of course, I kept away from drawing and painting, but I had a ceramics class taught by a wonderful man named Mark Zamantakis. And so as a ceramics class, what do you learn? You learn how to center, and you learn how to focus. But Mark also taught us that while you're centering, remain aware of all the possibilities. So what did that mean for me at that time? Well, I had to do a report on glazes. So I was at the Ross Cherry Creek Library in Denver looking for books on glazes, and it was 1971. So all the books having to do with China, whether it was the porcelain variety or the country, were all together. And so as I was looking for these books, as I was focusing on these books, I remained open to the possibilities. And where did the possibility lie? On the top shelf, in two oversized books that were really interesting to me because they were leather bound and they had, gold lettering on them. And I brought these two books down, and they were both English translations of the I Ching, of the Book of Changes. But these two English translations were so different one from another, I thought, what's with this language? And that week, of course, I had failed a French exam, so I was in search of a new language. And fortunately, at Denver University, they offered a night course in Chinese, and so I started taking Chinese there. And did that change my life? It certainly did. So graduating from high school, there weren't a lot of universities in the United States that offered Chinese at that time, but I found one called Brown University in Rhode Island. And there, for my first year, I get a little touched when I think about these professors, but there for my first year I had a guy named Jimmy Ren, and although his name appears to be a Chinese name, in fact it's not. I spelled it wrong here. It's actually W-R-E-N, and I apologize, Jimmy, wherever you are. And Jimmy took Chinese and teaching Chinese very, very seriously. How seriously did he take it? He would call me into his office. He would pull out a dental mirror and another mirror, and he would put them, he would make me hold them, and he would show me, no, your tongue doesn't go there, it goes here. So he was very passionate about it. And what he taught me was that passion is, in fact, a powerful drug. And his passion for Chinese was so great that I caught it also, and I carry it to this day. Another professor at Brown was a guy named David Lattimore. David Lattimore taught classical Chinese, and what was his lesson? Well, his lesson was, don't be afraid to be different. Why was he so qualified to teach that? His father's a man named Owen Lattimore. Owen Lattimore was one of the first victims of the McCarthy trials in the United States. And because of Owen's interest in China, Owen was labeled as being a disloyal American. So the lesson was well taught. Then I went from Brown. They said I should go to a bigger school because I was interested in teaching, and they said, Brown is not your regular school. So you got to go somewhere big and mean. And so I went to UC Berkeley. And there I had a very interesting professor, Edmund Schaefer. Edmund Schaefer taught Taoist philosophy. Edmund Schaefer spoke in classical Chinese. Not only did he speak in classical Chinese, but he spoke in Tang Dynasty reconstructed Chinese, which meant that if you were a Cantonese speaker and very, very familiar with classical, you might be able to understand him. But it was through Edmund that I first really learned about Yuanfen as we were studying Taoist canonical texts. And what he taught me, and what I learned from those texts, was know when to listen and observe, because Yuanfen is everywhere. Then I went on a journey to Taiwan where I studied at the Stanford Center. It's called IUP. And there I had a really tough teacher. Her name was Na Lao Shi. Na Lao Shi's father had been the curator at the Forbidden City Museum before he had gone to Taiwan. And with Na Lao Shi, I studied for an entire year, character by character, page by page, a Chinese classic novel called Xi You Ji, The Journey West. It's the one with Sun Wukong, you know, the monkey and everything. And so, you know, with Na Lao Shi, it was really, I mean, I worked really hard. I worked really hard. You know, we had many, many hours of, you know, one-on-one classes. And, you know, I'd ask Na Lao Shi, you know, do you think I'm improving? Do you think, you know, after all this time, I've had 4 years of college Chinese, and now I'm here continuing my studies. Am I improving at all? And she said to me, David, be your own critic. Don't wait around for others to criticize you. You look at yourself first, and you see where you can improve. And I thought that was a really good lesson. Because children are fragile, and we don't like to criticize them. But what we can do is help them to become introspective in terms of being able to criticize themselves. Then after IUP, I thought I wanted to make a change in direction in my life. And so I went to business school to get an MBA. And while at business school, an Africanist named Dick Mahoney, whose father had been the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, took me under his wing. Why did he take me under his wing? Well, he was given the order by the school to set up an exchange program here in China. And as we say in my native language, he didn't know from China. So he wanted to have somebody who knew a little bit about China. And so I came with Dick Mahoney in 1980 to set up a program at what has ultimately become UB. And what Dick taught me was, you know, life is short, and you have to bring a spirit of joy and love to what you do. And so whether it's as a teacher or whether it's what you're teaching, that's a terribly important idea to instill in those students and also to keep to yourself, that you must bring that joy and fun to what you do. Then I went, of course, after business school, and well, you know, that wasn't enough. I was offered jobs at that time by the CIA, the NSA, Procter & Gamble. Nothing which really interested me very much. And so my father, who passed away last year at 93, was a lawyer. So it was the last thing, on my list that I wanted to do. But so I went to law school. And there I had the incredible fortune to study with a man named Melville Nimmer. Now, if you were US lawyers, you'd go, of course. Why? Because who has written the final treatise on American copyright law except for Melville Nimmer? And Melville Nimmer has really created US copyright law. And why is that the case? Well, I was at UCLA Law School, Los Angeles. He was in the middle of the film industry. It was being around those creative people that drove him to be creative with the law. And so what he taught me was plug in to that creative energy around you. And that's a really important thing. It means bringing people into the classroom who are creative. It means exposing kids to what's creative. It means you yourself as teachers have to be tuned in to the creativity of your own students. And what you learn from that, you can apply to whatever it is you do. And last, and certainly not least, is Bill Alford. Now, Bill was my law professor at UCLA who taught me Chinese law. Bill now heads up the China law program at Harvard. And so in addition to substantive Chinese law, which he taught me, and I have to tell you that in 1984, 85, 86, Chinese law was quite simple at that time. We didn't have a lot of laws on the books. But what Bill really taught me was, and I've put this in another native language of mine, Bill taught me how to be a mensch. And what's a mensch? Mensch is the German word for man, but it's the Yiddish word. We have a Chinese equivalent that's wei ren. It's how you are as a person. It's what you stand for when you stand before the mirror or students or your own children. And so Bill really gave me that lesson, that no matter what you do, you gotta be a mensch. You have to be someone that you're proud of being. And in the course of doing that, don't be afraid to ride cosmic waves. Because in the course of Yuanfen going on, you'll meet people who give you all sorts of ideas. I'm sometimes afraid to watch TED. I watch it a lot, but I'm afraid. Why? I look and I go, do I have time to change my life today? Because there are always these, like, you know, you hear these people and they're so passionate about what they're talking about, and it's kind of like, you know, I don't know if I really have time today to change my life. But it's being open to those cosmic waves that's really important. And what was the common thread that they all taught? Follow your dreams and make them happen. And so what did that mean for me? Well, I created my life's tapestry during that other half after becoming a student of Chinese, and I still am a student of Chinese. My kids make fun of me that I have, hundreds of Chinese dictionaries in the bathroom. It's just one of those things that no matter how old you get, or no matter how old I get, I will never be done studying it. But it was their dreams that also led me to becoming a corporate lawyer, where I was able to bring a lot of creativity to doing law in China. Some people think of that as being oxymoronic in itself. But one does certainly have to be creative here when dealing with legal issues here. And ultimately, it led me to go into my favorite client, which was Microsoft. I helped Microsoft set up here in 1993. And when I had an opportunity to go inside Microsoft, I certainly took it. And it was a great experience. And I was a lawyer there for a while. And then I plucked up my courage during a visit by Steve Ballmer, who said, we need to have somebody who brings it all together in terms of piracy. We have, 95% usage. No one buys our software here. So we need a piracy czar. And so I said, okay, I'm your man. So I became the piracy czar. And what did that allow me to do? Well, it gave me a housing allowance, which I never had before as a partner at a law firm. So I took over an old factory space in 798. And I turned it into a really funky loft with chairs that I designed made out of the facial features of Michelangelo's David. So I have big nose chairs and an ear sofa. I actually was thinking of doing other parts, though my daughter said she would report me if I did. And it was featured in a lot of magazines, and I was really quite proud of that. And then there was one magazine up here called World of Interiors from the UK. And I was taking them through the loft at the time, and I told them how it had evolved. And then they said, well, what's next? And so kind of put on the spot, I said, I've always wanted to have a swimming pool in my living room. So not wanting to be a liar, the next day I talked to Xiaopan, who used to be my driver, now he's my project manager, and I said, Xiaopan, can I have a pool in my living room? And he said, I don't see why not, give me a drawing. So I made a drawing, we showed it to Xiao Chen, our contractor, and he said, that would hold about 50 tons of water. So we'd have to see, a structural engineer. So we went out to Tsinghua, and we got a structural engineer, and he said, he told us exactly how it would have to be poured, and this was going to be, elevated off the ground. And one thing led to another, and no one said to me, no, you can't build a pool in a rental property. So I went ahead and built that elevated pool with a glass bottom to it. And I swim every day, and I will be able to again in the wintertime because the heat's come on. And so what I did is I brought in our hot water pipes into the pool so it becomes a really nice place to swim. And then, when I got a chance to talk to, Bill Gates when he would come out here. And so Bill Gates, about a year and a half ago, said to me he was going to be, leaving the corporate world and focusing on what his heart really spoke to him about, and that was the foundation. So I thought, there's the writing on the wall for you, David. What's here? So I decided, I'm going to leave the corporate world. I left Microsoft. I took the first floor of my loft, and I turned it into an art gallery called the Yuanfen New Media Art Space, because keeping in mind my experience with Mrs. Bloom in 6th grade, that I really was never going to be an artist myself, but I did have a sense of technology, and I had worked with tremendous tech people who were artists at heart and creating really wonderful things. So I showcase new media art at my space. So the lesson to be learned, they're just my own lessons in life. Frame whatever it is you do as art and let your imagination and inspiration guide you. Remain centered and focused, but at the same time remain open to the possibilities. Don't be afraid to be different. Know when to listen and observe Yuanfens all around you. Be your own worst critic. Know how to ride a cosmic wave. Your passion's a powerful drug. Get others addicted to it. Bring joy and a spirit of fun to what you do and plug into the creative energy around you. And most importantly, but teach your students to follow dreams, and they'll make them real on their own. Thank you.